Borussia Dortmund fans. We have here with us Reese today. He's a big Borussia Dortmund fan based out of the US. And we've been following his account for a while, and he does amazing content. And we thought, what best way to talk about the Borussia game than with Reese, who obviously has a lot of knowledge about the club, is an ardent fan, and that's the kind of thing that we do out here in Barca. We are having fun of Barca, and we've been doing this for the Bayern show. We mostly try to get somebody from the opposite team to talk about their points of view as well. So welcome, Reese. It's lovely to have you here, and we're looking forward to doing this. We've obviously the format remains the same, guys. We'll talk about the game, what we think the formation should be. I think Barca started very well this season, and Dortmund has had kind of a mixed season till now. I would say, depending on their usually high, lofty standards. But given the fact that in the last 5 games, Barca haven't played that well in Champions League, what actually matters is on game day what happens. And Barca hasn't been well. So me and Dom both think that it'll be much more closer than what we would originally had in our thinking. With that, I welcome Dom. Dom, welcome in. Reese, welcome in. Why don't you have a couple of things to say to our fans, and we can get started?
Looking forward to this game. Obviously, anytime you're playing against Barcelona, it's a huge match. But especially for the context of Dortmund's season so far, you kind of alluded to it already, Dev. I mean, it's been a very inconsistent road so far. You have a new manager in Nuri Sahin. You've had good results, you've had disappointing results, and seemingly it's just so far it's been a matter of where they're playing. Conveniently at home, Dortmund seemed like a dramatically different team, and I know a lot of teams experience that sort of inconsistency no matter how big of a club you are, but Dortmund have experienced it to the extreme this season, where they've been virtually unbeatable at home and they can't grab a point away from home. So that's been the case, but that's where we're at right now. But like you said, Dortmund do find themselves in what I consider a little bit more of a upwardly trending shift over the last 3 or 4 match days. I think that there are some positive signs. Obviously, we'll get into that, but yeah, happy to discuss it, guys.
Tom?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just the fact that we are playing away from home or they are playing at home, that makes it that much difficult for us. But we'll see. Yeah, it should be a tight battle. On paper, I'm still kind of leaning towards Barca. We have to. But with that out of the way and this short intro out of the way, I think we can just go into tactics and see what we can actually expect. So the way I envision this is just we're going to go over the lineups real quick and then do some tactics for both sides and then see what happens. Okay, I'll just share my screen. Dev, you might have to approve that once I press it.
Yeah.
And let me know once you can actually. Oh yeah, there we go. Right. So I'll start with Barca because Borussia. Reese, you can tell me more about that because my provisional Borussia lineup might be completely off. But we'll see. I'll start with Barca, which is pretty straightforward. We saw this team, the exact same team against Real Betis, and I think Barca at this very moment, this is what their gala or strongest 11 looks like. They might not all be in top form, but on paper at least, this is what we are looking at. This is what I think will happen come Wednesday night as well. So you do have Peña between the sticks. I think there was some discussion about Szczesny potentially taking over Peña somewhere along the line, but that hasn't happened yet. And it seems that Flick is still trusting Peña to do the job, so I wouldn't expect any changes there. Inigo Kubarsi, the pillars of this back line in terms of progression and also defending, obviously. So I think that won't change. Balde, Koundé, the fullbacks, the midfield 3 is where there might be some rotations, but I would not expect it, right? So Casado, Pedri, and Olmo, these are the 3 midfielders that usually are a part of the strongest midfield that we have at the moment. And then obviously the front 3 of Rafinha, Lewandowski, and Lamine, this doesn't really change. For big games or almost any games, this is the 3 that you would expect to actually start. Now, I've put some players on the side here. I've put Frenkie, Gavi, Ferran, and Fermin. And I think these are the 4 players that if there was to be some rotation or, just before the game or during the game, these are the players that you would be looking to feature at one point or the other. So you could have theoretically Gavi instead of Pedri, although he's not going to start ahead of Pedri. You could have Frenkie in there as well, maybe instead of Olmo even. And then Ferran obviously can be either a left winger or or a number 9, depending on what Flick wants him to do. But this is basically the Barca lineup. Now, Reese, you can tell me more about the Borussia lineup, because I've put some question marks here, because initially I put Anton here. Is that how you pronounce his name? But he's injured as far as I'm aware. So who plays this? This is my main point of interest when it comes to your guys. And also Gross or Brandt, I'm not sure who you prefer in that role. I've seen both players kind of feature in this kind of left center midfielder position. But yeah, you take it away.
Also, Reese, if you can just talk about your perception of our lineup, right? When you see this lineup on the pitch, like as a Dortmund fan, what do you feel? Like, these are rollovers. Oh no, this is going to be a tough game. Like, what do you feel?
No. So first of all, that let me just clear that right away. There's no rollovers anywhere on the pitch, and from my perspective at all. I mean, it's not that case. And I mean, to be honest, there's a lot of differences between, I'm using this as an example, there's a lot of differences between the way that Barcelona functions and the way that Bayern Munich function. But the way that Dortmund approached Bayern is intriguing to me, because that saw a dramatic shift in terms of the way that Dortmund has been approaching teams of this caliber over the past 2 or 3 seasons, including last season. You know, a lot of people in Europe are aware of the run that Dortmund went on last year deep into the Champions League, but it's not because they were necessarily ambitious in terms of their pressing approach against strong teams. For example, it was actually quite the opposite. They were very reluctant to take any risk. They sat back a lot. But against Bayern, we saw a different approach. And for large parts of that game, it was actually extremely effective. And so my question would be whether or not they are kind of bold enough to apply that same approach to Barcelona. Now, in terms of the lineup that you've put out there, to be honest, that actually is probably what I would be assuming as well. Now, Anton is injured, like you said. Anton is injured. He will definitely not be featuring for this game. It would have actually been Nicolas Zula instead of Emre Can.
Right,
but he also got injured against Gladbach over the weekend. So I'm not sure what the time frame is. From what I have been looking at, there's no clear update in regard to Zula. So I would also be assuming Emre Can. I mean, Julian Brandt, as you've also mentioned, he has missed. He missed the Gladbach game. He has been in training. But he did miss the Gladbach game. So he might play. But I think what we get to when it comes to the option of Pascal Gross is a tricky one, and Sabitzer is as well, and I'll explain why. When it comes to Pascal Gross, he is simultaneously Dortmund's best ball progressing midfielder. He is able to hit long balls. He's most secure, makes the correct decision on the ball, avoids sloppy losses of possession in his own hat. Like he's the most reliable player in that regard, but he's also a bit of a defensive liability. And he's not able to apply sufficient defensive pressure higher up the pitch during a high block or a high press. So the midfielder out of that 3 that is primarily tasked with that approach is actually Sabitzer, who is going to be by far the more advanced up the field without the ball than the other 3. Mecha and Pascal Gross will sit behind him. But even if it's Julian Brandt instead of Pascal Gross, the same concept applies, where he is still the defensive liability in midfield. And so I think that's actually probably the lineup I would be projecting. Now you've got Adeyemi, Julian Brandt, and Daniel Malen on the side there. And that makes a lot of sense, because those are exactly the question mark players. And I think we can all kind of agree, people who are familiar with Karim Adeyemi, that's the potential player that if he features, it opens up other opportunities. From the Dortmund perspective, it kind of changes what your options are. And I guess from Barcelona's point of view, it does add an additional severe threat that you consider when it comes to transitional play and counterattacks.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm sure from Barca's perspective that you're primarily looking at, about Jamie Gittins. He's in fantastic forms.
Absolutely.
He's playing lights out, but to be totally honest, outside of Jamie Gittins, you can't really pinpoint a different Dortmund player on that front line that is necessarily individually so threatening in isolation on the flanks, whereas Adeyemi would be that player if he could play. But again, he hasn't played in a few match days. He is training, but that's going to be, I get the sense that's more of a game time decision, and they'll probably weigh the risk of that. So, but yeah, just in terms of that, I mean, I look at that's obviously an extremely strong Barcelona side with an incredible amount of midfield depth, by the way. I mean, that's just the thing that blows my mind when I look at Barcelona's roster. I just can't believe how many different attacking, extremely secure ball carriers there are on that field. It's amazing. And so that's where I'm like, okay, if Dortmund is going to potentially be ambitious without the ball, like they were against like they were against Bayern Munich, I question whether or not they're bold enough to try and apply the same approach to Barcelona, because to me, you just look at the technical quality and the ability to bypass pressure from Barcelona's midfielders, and I'm not convinced that a Pascal Gross or a Julian Brandt can not be a liability in that regard when it comes to trying to contain a Pedri or a Casado or anyone like that. So,
yeah, that's interesting, because one of Barca's current weaknesses, or recurring weaknesses even, is just bypassing this midfield. We seem to be very direct as of late, and we don't really play through our ball handles. I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, Pedri, Casado, both are press resistant. Frankie is, Gavi is. In theory, on paper, we do have players who actually play with the ball at our feet constantly and beat the pressure that way through our technical quality. However, what Barca have been doing lately is just bypassing this. They would just have Inigo and Kubarsi as these ball-playing center backs, but they would use them in a way that just they would just go direct to Lewandowski. They would go direct to Lamine. And so that is one way Borussia, if they can kind of shut down this midfield or access to the midfield and then force Peña into long distributions, that might be something that you could use. But okay, let's slow down for a bit. I'll just so this is basically the lineups are done. I think this is what we can expect. One question though: so if Adeyemi plays, let's say he plays, where does he slot in? I'm is he there? Like on the left, on the right flank, or the left flank? What changes happen then? Because I've seen Bayer and Guirassy, Bayer can be a number 9 as well if Guirassy doesn't play. But yeah, you tell me.
Well, I think I like to paint this a little bit of picture for context as well, because last season, when people have those memories of what Adeyemi did so well in the Champions League against teams like PSG, I can just guarantee you right now, if he was able to play against Barcelona this week, he is not going to be doing what he was doing last season against PSG, for example, where he was essentially used as a left-sided wingback. That's not going to happen. There's no shot that happens, because, to be honest, that's also just not conducive to getting the most out of the players who are playing well right now. And I like Jamie Gittins, for example. He's not moving from that spot whether Karim plays or not. Jamie Gittins is playing on that left wing. He's solidified that as his position, even if Adeyemi is fit. So I would think it would be in place of where you have Maxi Bayer right now on that right-hand flank. And the way that looks from a high block or obviously a mid block, it changes a little bit. So Dortmund's approach, even against Bayern, once the press was beaten or once they were settled into more of a mid block, it would be much more of a 4-4-2 with Sabitzer pressing with Guirassy up top. And you'd have Gittins and Adeyemi dropping back into more of a flat 4-4-2 situation. And so if Adeyemi was to play, though, to not belabor your point about where he would play, I would assume the right wing. I just am very convinced that you're not going to see him slot back into a wing back sort of position. Because that's also not been Nuri Sahin's approach. He's clearly not going for that, and I actually agree with that. I think that you were thinking about him playing as a left wing back and Dortmund reverting to a back 5 in deep in knockout stages of football, where the only thing that matters is get the result at all costs sort of situation. But I don't think that's how Dortmund need to approach this game. Obviously, Dortmund want to do whatever they can to win the match here, but I think it's more of continuing to establish the trajectory that Nuri Sahin wants this team to go to. And that needs to be a level of, kind of being willing to play your game, even if it's a Barcelona, even if it's a Bayern Munich, like, what I'm saying? It can't just be sit back and let Barca have 80% of the ball and hope you're going to just,
But isn't that the best way to beat Barca, Reese? I mean,
theoretically,
in this season, most of the teams who have beaten us have given us possession for about 70-75%. They have hit us on the counter exactly like what we want to do, and they have defeated us. So that's one. And the second question that I had for you, Reese, is that Nuri Sahin, he's new. Like, at least for me, he's new, right?
Yeah.
But as fans of the club, as you watch him, and you think about, okay, he's your coach. What kind of coach is he? Is he a positional coach? Is he of the Pep Guardiola genre? Is he of the Hansi Flick type? Is he something?
Yeah.
Is he Jose Mourinho? Which camp
Well,
is Nuri Sahin from?
so, and that's a great question. A lot of people ask they ask the same thing, and that's a fair question, especially when you're talking about a young manager who doesn't have an extensive history and extensive amount of tactical history that you can go back and review. But what I will say is that through a combination of both what he has been very vocal about, the type of vision he has for the football he wants to play, and just what we've seen so far put into practice, I mean, Nuri Sahin initially when Dortmund started this season, they were actually playing with a back three, and in many ways, he kind of led a lot of people to believe that what he tried to implement was some sort of hybrid of a sort of Ruben Amorim approach to a back three, maybe also partially inspired by Xabi Alonso's success in the Bundesliga with Leverkusen. And he actually started with, for the first, I want to say, 3 match days, it was actually a back three, and to be fair, Dortmund didn't lose any of those games. They actually got a win over a Frankfurt side the first game of the season that it's actually turned out Frankfurt are much better than we all anticipated. And so initially it kind of seemed like that was the clear structure, and also the signings of a young Couto, obviously played for Girona last year in Spain. A lot of people who are Barcelona fans would be familiar with his game and how he's almost not even a fullback. He's just a winger playing on that whole flank. So anyway, we sign players like that, and it makes you think, okay, it's a back three with emphasis on wing back play and things like that. But Dortmund were not seeming to be able to create much of an opportunity to really generate scoring chances with that. And there was a quick reversion to a traditional, back four. In regard to the style and the way he wants to play, it is not a Pep Guardiola style. It is not an insistence on possession. And if there's one quote I can draw that kind of like really shines a simple light into what Nuri Sahin wants, and I'm kind of paraphrasing here, but he was interviewed a couple match days ago after a match. I think it may have been against Mainz, I'm not sure, but he said, we care about possession, but we only care about possession in the sense that it's progressive movement. So he emphasized the fact that, yes, Dortmund want to close down the ball quickly, but once they close it down, they want to get forward as fast as possible. They are not looking to press, trap, gain possession, and revert backwards and try to take a methodical, slow approach. They're looking to do the opposite, and you've absolutely seen that happen. Dortmund's counter-attacking statistics and tendencies have gone significantly higher up than they were last season under Edin Terzic. So that's where there has been a shift, is there's more of a, I guess I would say, sort of a hybrid approach where they're more than willing to be patient and build up, but they're also more anxious to take opportunities when they are presented in transitional play than they have been previously under Edin Terzic. And that's the biggest tactical difference that I've seen between the two managers. Is with Terzic, it was very much the opposite. And so much of Dortmund's success this season in big games, including against the one against Bayern Munich they just played, I mean, the goal they scored was through exploiting, transitional play on the wings. It was not pinning Bayern back into a low block and methodically picking them apart. That's just not the game. So when it comes to what you've mentioned, Dortmund theoretically having the best chance by sitting back and counterattack, I still think that is true. But I just think that you're playing a dangerous game. And I know that Barcelona may have been exposed a few times, but I think that
You definitely are.
Yeah, I think you're playing a dangerous game from Dortmund's perspective. If you're going to just willingly allow the quality that Barcelona has to just sit in your half and just think that it's going to be so simple to find Gittins in isolation against Jules Koundé, and that's going to be your game plan. Like, I think there's potentially some success there, yes, but I just get nervous as a Dortmund fan thinking that that's truly all you're putting into it. And I just think the Barcelona has too much quality in too many positions. And what I concern myself with is that with players like Marcel Sabitzer and Pascal Gross, you have players who are showing that they're willing to press high, but they're not able to mentally stay focused in tracking midfielders who take up a variety of positions. Mm-hmm. So if you have for example, Pedri, Dani Olmo, and Casado, and they're interchanging positions, they're switching, one's dropping deep, one's pulling a midfielder wide, things like that, that's when Dortmund gets picked apart, and that has happened. We can't stay locked into that concept and be disciplined defensively to make that work. And so that is where my concern is for just having the approach that you're going to let Barcelona get you into that position and lull you to sleep, so to speak. And so it's interesting because, again, you guys will say it better than me, of course. The strategy and the style of play that Hansi Flick has implemented is obviously dramatically different than what we saw with Xabi.
Yeah, totally.
And I think
So,
there's a lot.
Dom, I had a quick question on the Gittins one for you. Just picking up from what Reese said. I think, yes, the game plan of, Gittins versus Kunde is going to happen. It's going to happen. Now, in your point of view, two contexts. One is obviously Jules Kunde as a player, which is great. He's been amazing this season mostly, but lately hasn't. So in a situation like that, who do you see winning the duel, given the current forms of the team, and given that Dortmund's left flank is quite active in probably their most potent form of attack, and Balde hasn't been the best in that sense. So in this whole fullback situation, Dom, how do you see this stacking up based on the formation you have put on the board?
Right, all the fullbacks. Well, in this direct duel, Gittins versus Kunde, I'm not sure Kunde is going to handle him that well. We've seen Gittins in the last couple of games. He can actually take more than just one man at a time. He can take two players, even three. When he's ganged up, he can still emerge as the victor. So I don't know if Kunde has it in him to kind of stop him 1-1, especially his form now. He seems a bit fatigued, a bit tired, lack of focus, lack of rotation, all those things are kind of kicking in. And I don't know. I wouldn't. If I'm Barca, I'm trying to avoid this. This scares me, right? Kunde and Gittins in this area alone, this scares me a little bit, especially that. So I started with the Borussia build-up, and this is how Barca press, right, Reese? Barca press with wingers coming in from the outside in because we don't have a spine that can cover a lot of ground. So we have Lewandowski who can't really run that much. So what Flick does, he drops Lewandowski deeper on one of the pivots, and he puts one of the 10s or the midfielders on the other pivot. So this is what it would look like. You will have the wingers kind of closing in from outside in and pressing the center back. So both of them, Lamine and Rafinha. And then you have the center of the pitch kind of dropping a bit deeper to cover the pivots. However, you can see immediately what that does. It puts kind of Kunde and Balde in this decisional dilemma. They have to cover two players at the same time. So they have to make a decision. Do I leave Ryerson free, or do I leave Bayer free? Do I leave Bensabini free, or do I leave Gittins free? This is the issue with Barca's pressing, especially, and I've seen this, I'm not sure if they do this regularly, Reese, but I've seen Borussia play with kind of three at the back. They use Kobel as the third man sometimes to make. So if let's say Lamine is pressing Schlotterbeck and then he curves his run all the way to Kobel, what will sometimes happen is a third man run, third sequence like this essentially, right? So the ball will go into the pivot and then out wide into the free center back, right? And now Schlotterbeck all of a sudden has all the space and time to actually run with the ball forward and then, I don't know, whip a diagonal pass into Bayer or something like that, right? So that scares me a bit. Yeah, is that something they do? Because I've also seen like, okay, so that's good to know because
that is,
and provided he does that, and given the form, let's say Frankie De Jong is in, right? How much of a liability is that for us, Tom?
It is a liability because this pressing shape that Flick has instilled just now is his way to playing around the liabilities of the squad, because you don't have runners, you don't have Lewandowski who can press high, so you have to have the wingers press because they are your engine in the front line. But then that's a domino effect because if he can't press, they have to press. But if they press, now Kunde has to press or Bensabini is completely free. But then what that does is Casado, who's kind of in charge of this area here, let's say, between the lines, now all of a sudden Casado needs to cover a lot of ground. He's not boxed in a small area. Instead, he has to go wide, shift wide, and cover players over a larger stretch. And Casado and Gittins, it does, again, not a really good combination for us. So it is a problem there because De Jong, I'm assuming you mentioned him because he is one of those players who can actually track back. He can actually go back and forth on the pitch. He can actually do that better than Pedri, better than Costa, better than Olmo. However, I don't see him in his current form and his current mental state, even I don't see him starting this game. Although maybe there would be an argument for Flick actually to put him in instead of, I don't know, maybe an Olmo or something like that. So
Um,
this, yeah,
don't you think, and this is just on that point, if we extend that, like, it would seem that for Gittins, a player like Araujo would be perfect. He's going with the team. He's ready.
yeah.
They're saying it's not played. Do you think Flick's giving him 30 minutes out there, given
Uh,
Kunde's problems?
it's difficult to say if Gittins really ends up being a big problem and Borussia actually can access him in these situations, then potentially if it gets ugly. But I don't think Flick will start with Araujo, just because it will be his first
Yeah.
game back after a while. So I don't think that will happen. I think Araujo, if he does come on, and I don't think see defenders as substitutes, I don't think that will unless we're winning heavily. I don't see that really happening. But yeah, on paper, if Araujo was fit and fully sharp, match sharp, yes, there would be an argument for Araujo to be here and be someone like a band-aid or just a shadow on Gittins, maybe like we used to see him against Vinicius Junior, for
Vinny.
example.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there is some argument for that. I don't see him starting. I don't think that will happen. But yeah, this is what worries me. When Barca press, they are kind of primed to press a two-man backline, like the two center backs. But what if Kobel goes here? What if I don't know? I've seen also Ryerson form a back three, and then Ben Sabini would actually invert and go here. And then you have more combinations because that kind of pulls the fullback over there. And again, creates these isolations out wide if you can access them. There was one great sequence that they did where it was something like this, I think, where the central midfielder was kind of just ping the ball there into this space, and Ben Sabini would pull a fullback with him inwards, and then all of a sudden, again, this center back has all the space to run forward and then combine with either Pascal Gross or Gittins, and that for Barca, I don't know how they can react to this with the current setup, at least. Reese, any of this making sense to you from Borussia perspective?
No, you're spot on. You're spot on. That's why I'm nodding my head, because you're spot on. So, I'd actually like to look at and I'll make it really quick. The situation you're looking at right now, and then the one you previously had sort of drawn up, where it's more of playing out from a goal kick or something like that. But from this situation, you're absolutely right. They use Ben Sebaini to invert in a way that they never use Ryerson. So you will never see Ryerson as a right fullback do what Ben Sebaini is doing there, inverting. It never happens. And the reason they do that is because of what you've already drawn up, because it enables that space, but it's also because of the specific player that it enables to be on the ball. As you have pictured here, it's Nico Schlotterbeck. Now, the strongest asset that Nico Schlotterbeck has that is above anybody else in the team, and for my money, it's better than anybody else in the entire Bundesliga, is his expansive passing range is absolutely elite. I mean, if you look at, I know you guys use, things like Data MB and sources like that. If you look at virtually any graphic of progressive passes per 90, things like that, you'll find Nico Schlotterbeck at the very top of virtually everything. And that's across Europe. I mean, so he's not just one of multiple center backs who could potentially be good in that space. He's also just uniquely extremely good on his left foot, obviously a left-footed center back who likes to extend wide. He's more than willing to carry the ball into deeper, wider areas on the flank. And like you said, he's extremely capable of hitting that wide switch to a Maxi Bayer on that flank or over the top to Gitten. So a lot of the structures that Dortmund have from both against a mid-block and from a goal kick, it's all structured on trying to make sure that it's focusing on that left-hand side so that Nico Schlotterbeck can be the center back that's progressing the ball. So like you said, Ben Spaini, he'll absolutely do that against Barcelona. He'll try to pull a Lamine or somebody of that nature. He'll try to pull them into the middle, but not because he has any intention to receive the ball. It's just bait. It's just to try and open up that flank. One thing that we rarely see Ben Spaini actually engaging in any sort of build-up actions. Once he does that, he's not an outlet. He's not someone they try to play through when he does invert. It's literally just to get the space for Nico. And so, and also if you're able to pull it back from like a goal kick situation, if Kobel's in the middle and Duchan, because the thing is exactly what it was there as well. Yeah, precisely. And so what you saw against Bayern, and I'll illustrate the way that Dortmund drew this up against Bayern, and they scored from a goal kick just like this. Felix Mecha, Benspany's on the left flank there.
Oh, right.
Right there. Yeah, perfect. And then you have Felix Mecha was actually level with Sabitzer as more of a double pivot. They had a double pivot from that position with it would be like Pascal Gross ahead of them. Precisely. Right. Yeah. So what you saw was the way that Dortmund actually want this to go is kind of how you've described. They want the opposition to lock the flank and then invert centrally to try and force play to the middle on Kobel, like you described. They actually want that to happen because Sabitzer and Mecha will have this posture such as that, but they'll make a sudden, very intentional, very aggressive run towards Kobel to link up with that play, but it's almost always to shuttle it out wide to Schlotterbeck directly.
Right. Yeah.
That happens almost every single time. And then from then, that's when you get into dangerous situations where you have Bensebaini's role in this exact scenario. His role is to try and bait or pull whoever is marking him deep towards Nico to try and put an island on Gittins. Try and make sure that whoever's marking Gittins is very isolated with no additional help. And that's how they scored. So they were able to pull Bayern's right fullback. In that sense, it was Konrad Leimer. They were able to pull him in a 1v1 situation with Gittins where he had absolutely no help, and Gittins won that battle, and then he just goes the length of the field and scores individually. I mean, so not to belabor the point, but that this is exactly what Barcelona will need to make sure they don't do. If there's any clear-cut thing they can't allow, they can't allow through a pressing structure, they can't allow Dortmund to easily switch play to Nico and allow him to play or have the option to play these balls to either winger where they're just marked by one player. That's just that's what Dortmund have done that has proven to be that effective. Dortmund haven't had a plethora of they haven't had a lot of answers from goal kicks, and actually Dortmund have struggled heavily against man marking more than virtually any other team in the Bundesliga. I would say Dortmund struggle heavily against man marking in a high block and a goal kick. So if you're Barcelona, I mean, the one thing you don't want to do is actually play to their strengths and just allow Nico to have time to make a choice there.
Right. Okay. So Nico is kind of the priority, and then Bensabini, he would be the one that you would potentially leave open. Then, well, if he receives the ball, is he any danger on the ball? I mean, in this scenario, then with the way you described it, I would rather have Kunde maybe stay deeper and not press Bensabini, then not even follow him, and try and kind of shut down the access to Schlotterbeck. Then, So in this scenario, what can Bensabini do on the ball? Is he any threat in this scenario where he has time and space? Obviously, maybe not as much as I've shown it here, but more than.
Again, that's a great question, and to me, that's where Barcelona, from my perspective, that's where Barcelona can find a lot of success is by forcing somebody who is not Nico Schlotterbeck to beat you on that back line through their passing range, because you don't have it. I mean, Bensebaini, I will say, is a little bit more of a threat in terms of progressing the ball and being able to hit a variety of passes in that way than Rierson, but like Rierson is not a threat in that regard, and especially if you're looking at an Emre Can, I mean. People have followed Emre Can's career, and especially people on the Dortmund side of things. There's been a lot of inconsistency, and he's shown flashes of being able to hit an extremely good, long ball. He can be a defensive presence. He's got some one-off performances that are extremely good, but it's a lot of inconsistency, and what you mainly see is a lot of really poor decision-making on the ball. So Dortmund are going to place even more of an emphasis on that left side. They're going to try and really avoid having to build up through Emre Can and Rierson at all costs. So if I'm Hansi Flick, I mean, of course, he's well aware of this. Of course, he's studying the game. I'm more than willing to force Dortmund to beat Barcelona in some other way, like force them to go to the right side, shuttle play that flank at all costs. Just don't let a situation develop where they hit it out wide to Bensebaini and Nico, and then you've just got Kunde or even an Araujo in a 1v1 situation with Gittins, because from Dortmund's perspective, that's what we want.
Right, yeah,
mean,
that's the main goal. Okay, yeah. I'll just reverse this now and see what Barca would be doing in possession against Borussia's
yeah.
out of possession. Let me just reset this real quick. But you tell me, what do you expect Borussia to press high? Do you expect them to kind of drop a bit deeper? What happens normally? I've seen Bayern actually being a very good pressing tool for you
Yeah.
guys, and Sabitzer as well. To be fair to him, let me just see. Is it more of a 4-4-2 situation, or let
Yeah.
me?
So from like I said, from a goal kick, what you'll see, a goal kick or a high block, really, like you've got it drawn up. What you'll see more of is it'll initially be, and I can draw it similarly to the way that they approached it against Bayern. It's more of Girassi is going to try and initially lock one side. And it'll vary which side it is, but normally he'll try to, the way you have it drawn up, he'll try to get Pena to play to his left side there, and he'll try
Uh-huh.
to make sure he'll
So
deliberately make that
some
sort of run.
curve the run like this, maybe block off
Yeah,
this side and then force him. Okay, yeah, I get it. Okay,
yeah.
I
So that's
understand.
exactly what he's going to do. Like Girassi is going to try and block off the outlet to Cabarsi and force it the other way. And what you'll see is Sabitzer will be right up there with him, in line
Awesome.
with Girassi. Yeah, Sabitzer will
Mhm.
be right there. And then Baxi Bio would be pretty much exactly where you've said it right there. And so if
Mhm.
Pedri or Casado are to drop deeper to try and be another
Mhm.
additional link to Pena, then you'll see,
Mhm.
um, again, you'll see Pascal Gross and Mecha trying to be close enough to be dangerous in that way. And what you saw against Bayern is that it was actually very effective for about 65, 70 minutes, but eventually Dortmund ran out of gas. And what
Mhm.
you saw is that they couldn't keep a player like Jamal Musiala off the ball in deep areas, and eventually technically sufficient and elite players such as Pedri were able
Mhm.
to keep on finding gaps and dropping deeper. And the more that happened, Dortmund started reverting further and further back and becoming less ambitious to press that high. So I think what I'm anticipating from Dortmund's point of view is it really is going to be, they're going to try and see how successful they are initially. I do anticipate that they'll try to show an aggressive posture at first, but if they're
Mhm.
consistently after 10 minutes, 15 minutes or so, if Pedri, Casado are getting on the ball too easily and they're not
Mhm.
able to truly cause problems, then Dortmund are going to sit back into more of a 4-4-2 and be happy to let Barcelona kind of play out from those deep positions.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. Because looking at this setup right here, obviously Olmo lately hasn't been used that well. He's not been participating in the build-up as much as he should be. So he's more of a this presence in the final third between the lines, and he's waiting for the ball to come to him instead of just dropping deeper and then being involved in the build-up.
Yeah,
However, if he was to drop deeper, Mecha and Gross are just purely outnumbered here as it is. So
yeah,
Barca could theoretically play through the midfield and maybe try and evade the pressure that way, which would be, I think, an ideal situation for them because that will be playing to their strengths. Because Pedri, Olmo, and Casero, they are press assisted. They can do that,
yeah,
right? They can do all of this with a man on their back as well.
yeah,
Obviously, Lamine will be dropping deeper as well, receiving the ball kind of more here in this area with Kunde, and then aiming to go forward. But as I said at the beginning of the stream, Barca have been a bit more vertical as of late, kind of
yeah,
just bypassing this middle of the pitch and then going to Lewandowski and trying to win this first ball and then second ball in this area, and then ejecting kind of Rafinha and Lamine into those spaces. But yeah, this is more or less the gist of, of the matchup. I think will Barca be able
So
to play through their midfield and use the technical advantage they have there, or
yeah.
how? Yeah, that's kind of the main thing. Dev, do
so a
you have
couple
any
of
thoughts or any
things.
questions? Yeah.
No, I think a couple of questions. I mean, it's interesting to just hear you guys just going at it and talking about the combinations. So, Reese, question to
Yeah.
you, right? If there were two things, two scenarios you were worried about the most from this Barca, what would that be? And then I'll come to you, Dom, with the same question regarding Dortmund. And then let's go and do some fancy old school projections, which
Hey,
we
let's
can be
go.
very embarrassed by the time the game ends. But that's fun. That's fun part of it. So,
Yeah,
Reese,
yeah,
obviously you've heard about the key things, right? We are vertical, right?
yeah,
Teams have figured that out to a large extent. They have been beating our offside press, offside trap much better than earlier in the season. Giddens will be a handful,
yeah,
and we generally, though we have enormous capability in our midfield, we don't really often utilize it for whatever reason, right?
Mhm.
Given all of that, but it's also true. The day we are on song, we can put 6 goals past any opponent,
Yep.
right? It
Mhm.
just we've seen that many times, right? So
Yep.
it's an inconsistent kind of a atmosphere out here. But what would be your two biggest concerns that you would like your team to be mindful of as
Yeah.
they take on Barca?
Yeah. So when it comes to, and I'll use this example right here as a big thing. So one of the things that one of the other reasons that Dortmund was so effective in preventing the most dangerous ball progressing player from having time to get on the ball, and that being against Bayern, and I'm talking about Jamal Musiala, is that Dortmund showed a very ambitious approach where from a mid block, from a high block, they would actually use, in that case, it was Anton before he got injured in the first half of that game. He actually would leave the back line and he would be willing to press Musiala all the way up until, virtually um,
Mhm.
the Bayern back line. He would basically follow Musiala anywhere on the pitch to try and make sure that he's always on his back and he's always ready to prevent that outlet. And that was extremely effective. But eventually, Dortmund ran out of gas, and they couldn't continue applying that pressure on a player of his caliber for 90
Caliber.
minutes. So my concern would be that the Emre Can is not going to be used in that way because Nuri Sahin will not view him as being capable of handling that responsibility the same way as Valdemar Anton was, or even Nicolas Zula was. And so what that says is that a player like Pedri or Casado, in my opinion, are going to have too much time on the ball to dictate the tempo of play and bypass any attempted pressure. So to put it simply, my biggest concern is that Dortmund may attempt to press initially, but because of the inability of a Pascal Gross or a Felix Mecha to individually mark Pedri or Casado effectively, obviously not shut them down, but effectively at least do a reasonable job on them, I think it's going to discourage a press very soon in the match. And kind of like I was describing a few minutes ago, I think that Dortmund may revert to sitting back too soon, and they may start inviting too much pressure too soon from Barcelona. Um, and so I think that you need to have a strong mentality and a willingness to not recklessly gamble, but also kind of hold your ground to a certain extent and not allow Barcelona to get in that rhythm. So my biggest concern would be that Dortmund allow Barcelona to dictate the tempo of play very early. And I know that Barcelona are playing more vertically like you're describing, but um, Dortmund are going to be it's going to be risk free from the back from their perspective. They're not going to be overly ambitious, but Sabitzer and Gross and Mecha have got to find a way to be effective off the ball.
And the data says,
So,
Reese, that anytime any team, right, has not been clear about their press, like they've started with the press, but then they've fallen back, or they came into the press a little bit later, they've lost.
yeah,
When a team has been committed to the press from minute one, right,
yeah.
not care about the possession, they've actually won against Barca this season. Okay, I'll turn the question back to Dom. Dom, you see this Dortmund, and the game against Bayern was actually very good to Reese's points. And we have talked about the challenges on pitch that we have already had, and the current form that the
Yeah.
team has it in. What are you most afraid about, and what do you think Barca should take care of?
I think the biggest question for me is Flick going to keep the pressing structure the same, or is he going to adapt it? Because if Borussia implement this structure that they've used against Bayern, and they actually have a 3-man backline, and then with Kobel or Ryers, I don't know, that kind of messes up everything that we've been doing, right? Because all of a sudden you have 3 players to mark, but only have 2 wingers who come in, and that would force either Lewandowski or Olmo to step up. But that's also an issue because they're not really these pressing machines, right? So how we handle that adaptation and how we handle the isolations that then come out of that, that's my biggest worry, because I don't want Gittins isolated with anyone, even if it's Araujo. I don't want that risk if I can help it. So this is the main question going into the game. And then on the ball, as we said, the Barca have clear strengths, they have clear flaws as well. So I think if we can play to those strengths and actually use Pedri, Casero, and Olmo the way that we know they can be effective, I can see Barca, well, not easily, but I can see Barca actually setting the tempo, controlling the game, dominating the game the way they would want to. But if we don't actually play through those players, if they actually don't use them that way, then we'll struggle again. Because one thing Dortmund will do, if they will outmuscle us in some sense. Maybe they will be a bit faster, a bit stronger. If we play that kind of game against them, we're not really putting our best foot forward. That's kind of my thing. And I'll just stop the share here because I won't be drawing anymore. Just so I can see you see you guys. But yeah, if any of the viewers have any questions, now is the time to actually voice them. We do have 600 people joining, which is nice. Thank you to everyone who's here with us. If there's anyone or any questions that you might have, feel free to ask. While we do wait, Dev, I'll go to you first. Straight up prediction, score prediction. What would you go for?
Tough one. It's really tough. But given just a couple of formation that we just talked about here, the absence of a few people from Dortmund, and more or less Barca having a full strength to go with, I think we will be at full strength to an extent. Correct.
Yeah.
And I think the team is also under a ton of pressure from that Betis game, which didn't go that well from us from that perspective, and they'll want to get into the. So I think Flick will adjust to your question. There are two things. Flick understands Dortmund better than most La Liga coaches do, because he has played in that league. So that's number one.
Sure.
Whether he adjusts or not, that's another thing. But he understands Dortmund, right? Much better than most La Liga coaches do. So that's number one. Number two, we saw this, Dom. Flick actually adjusted the high line with Bayern. He didn't against any other team, but with Bayern, he dropped it back by about 20 yards. He did, right, in the first 30 minutes or so.
Yeah.
So given all of that, I would go with a 3-1 for Barca. Just what I think. I don't think it will be a 1-0 kind of a game, because Barca don't do 1-0 games. That was the Xavi version of Barca. This Barca either scores 3 goals or 4 goals or doesn't, and they lose, and so on and so forth. So I think that's just how it's going to be. But the only caveat that I'm going to keep is if Dortmund do come committed that they are going to press us from minute 1, we can lose. I fundamentally believe that, because every time that has happened, we have actually lost.
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. Reese, what do you think?
Yeah, well, I actually really think that's a great point. And to be honest, I really see it the same way. And I had a lot of the questions going into the Bayern game. I don't mean to keep on talking about that too much from Dortmund's perspective, but they really showed a different approach that they haven't before. So for me, and for a lot of Dortmund fans, I'm wanting to see the same thing, where you've got to show that ambition. Now, if Dortmund can actually commit to that press, and again, this is the same Dortmund team that had a lead in the second half against Real Madrid. They went into Real Madrid and they were winning that game, but then they made the poor substitutions, and they decided that once they had the lead, they were going to take their foot completely off the gas, and it killed them. Yeah, exactly. You can't do that, and we paid the price for that. So against Barcelona, it's about the approach. Either way, given the fact that Dortmund have been so inconsistent and the variety of incredible options that Barcelona have. I mean, I've lost track how many times Lewandowski has scored both for Dortmund and against Dortmund over the years with Bayern. But I mean, I would anticipate that Barcelona win this game. I don't see a clean sheet for either side, like you said, Deb. I really don't see that, because Dortmund will. They're absolutely going to concede goals, but Bayern also are more than happy to win a game 5-2 than win a game 1-0. Like, that's just not the way it's going to happen. So I do see goals on either side. I get the sense that Barcelona are going to be very well aware, of course, of what Dortmund's biggest threat is. So if Dortmund do score, I think we might be looking at a different option. It might be through a set piece with a physical presence like Girassi, for example, or something like that. I think that Dortmund end up scoring a goal in this game, but ultimately I think it's sensible to expect. I'm anticipating more of a 2-1, maybe a 3-1 for Barcelona.
Let's take this question from Chopin. He says that we must use offside trap against Dortmund well. They're a team that thrive on pace, and we aren't fast enough to defend for our lives. Both correct points. Dortmund are fast. We cannot defend those high, like 40 yards that are left behind the high line. And Koundé struggles, and we have seen that. So Dom, you're the resident expert here. How would you consult with Flake on the Highline?
It's always, for me, it's always going to be the same answer for Barcelona. If we are in a foot race, we're doomed, right? We don't want that. So the best way for Barca to actually avoid that is to counter press well. You have to stop the ball at the source. That's the only way. And Barca's counter pressing has been kind of on and off. I don't know. Yeah, a bit iffy. Yeah, that's the right word. So if we can counter press well and stop the ball at the source, kind of stop Schlotterbeck from doing what he does best, I think there's a way to actually avoid this disaster of a foot race, because we can't really compete with a high line. If the offside trap doesn't work, we're obviously in a lot of trouble. So to me, it's always going to be that. It's going to be that. Just stop the ball at the source. That's number one. And number two is your temperament in possession kind of informs how you defend as well. If we are chaotic in possession, we will invite chaos to us out of possession as well, and you don't want that. So you have to be playing to your strengths, playing control environment, just decrease the variance as much as possible, right? That's what I would do. Now, whether we actually do it or not, I don't know, because lately we've been playing these tennis games with every team in the Liga, and we got burned a couple of times. And against Dortmund, we might be burned alive if we do that. So, yeah, that's my kind of short answer to that question.
Yeah.
Final prediction from you, Dom. So we've gone 3-1, 2-1, 3-1. What are you talking? I'm
going to go this. It's very boring of me to say, but yeah, I agree. I mean, 3-1 kind of does sound quite realistic to me. You know, goals from both sides, but Barca with a bit more firepower than Dortmund. The thing is, we are playing away from home, and obviously they've been entirely different beasts at home. So who knows what?
They haven't lost at home. We haven't been very good away from home, to be entirely honest. So there are many things, and as I said, the surprise factor of the Highline is gone. Like most teams know how Barca are going to come. So it won't be that easy. But as I said, like once they start combining, and if we score in the first 15, 20 minutes, it can be hard to contain. It can be hard because they play so fast on the so yeah, it'll be interesting to see. But that said, thank you, Reese. That was awesome to have you along, and we should have more of you as we go along in more of the stuff that we do. So that'll be great. Thank you guys for joining. A couple more questions. If we hoop the ball from the defense, we'll all be pissed, and we've been doing that. So yeah, it's just what the truth is. So we understand that, but this is, I think, where we'll call it curtains for this show. But we will be there live after the game. So we'll come back and we'll talk about the game, whether we lose or not. If we lose, we'll be pissed. If we not, happy days. But thank you guys for joining. Thank you, Reese, for joining. Thank you, Dom, for doing the hard work that you do on the board, and so on and so forth. So guys, stay safe, take care. For the Barca fans, Vizca Barca, and Reese, any message for your Dortmund fans?
Hey man, we've had a lot of good moments in the Champions League recently. We know what's coming. Maybe we're up for another one. Hopefully, I'm surprised. I mentioned in my last thread about Dortmund, trying to stay positive. We have a young manager. This is a process for us. Just stay positive, hope for the best. We don't know what can happen in front of the yellow wall. So that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, that's I love that stadium, man. You have such a good stadium, and I've been to that stadium. It's insane, the atmosphere. You guys have like outstanding atmosphere. With that, guys, see you. Join us live after the game.